So good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
And Ben, it's so nice to be here together. And
It is so nice.
The reason that Rabbi Schwartz is off the hook today is that Ben Kreshtool, this is your
I mean,
favorite.
it's not my favorite, but like I feel
Vayikra in general.
Vayikra in general, yes. I just feel that these parshiot in Vayikra are often misunderstood and not really given the credit that they deserve because the material is somewhat complicated and people are sort of afraid to, I think, dig a little deeper. And the topics can sometimes be a little controversial, and I just feel like people want to just skip right over it, and I don't feel that gives enough honor to the Torah.
It's so interesting because in some ways, like, people appreciate a good story.
Sure.
Right, and that you find sort of in the Book of Genesis, and then the first half of Exodus, and then you get back to it in Bamidbar, and you
It's
also
like a
Deuteronomy.
smidge in Vayikra, just like a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like a
There are
little
sort of like little
vignettes.
small
Yeah,
vignettes.
little vignettes.
But Ben, it's
Not
really
here.
interesting too, though, for people that are following along with us this year in the Torah. But that within the Orthodox community, especially the sort of more the further you go right within that community, they start their kids learning Torah in the Book of Vayikra.
Yep.
Which is really interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, it is interesting because it reminds me sort of what you had said earlier in the year, that you would like to start the Torah at like Mishpatim, and like people pick different parts of the Torah for different reasons. I think for Vayikra, the idea that ritual plays an important part in our lives, and if you start that young, it helps to create a life of meaning and have those rituals have meaning if you do them for a long time. So it like makes sense to me. I get it.
And it's so interesting when you think about ritual, right? That when kids are young, there are all sorts of rituals that parents and families put into their lives, and in some ways, it's also, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking it's interesting. I'm wondering if we give Jewish parents enough Jewish rituals.
Right.
Because we have a lot of secular rituals.
Right. And I think that there's a way to infuse Judaism even into those secular rituals, right? And I think that's what the tradition asks of us, is to try and figure out, I mean, look, these are these things we're going to do anyway. Why not infuse them with holiness?
I love that. And I wonder if it's not both, though, right? So, like,
totally could be both.
Our morning blessings say, like, you're going to get out of bed anyway. Say a bracha, say a prayer before.
Right. You're going to eat that apple anyway.
Right. But then there are also things that in some ways, how we wake up and how we go to sleep, which we are, as you're saying, going to do it anyway. But the question is, can we infuse that intentionality in, right? Like, what happens if instead of you, and I mean, especially this year as I'm saying Kaddish, I feel like I set my alarm for really early, and then I oftentimes, because I'm a late night person, am hitting the snooze button on my alarm.
That like terrifies me.
I don't like snooze.
That terrifies me.
Why?
I am a person who absolutely hates to be late. I hate it. Like I cannot deal with it. I don't think I've ever pushed the snooze button in my life. Like
just get up.
I just have to do it. I have to get up because I feel like if I snooze, I fear that I will sleep through it and then I'll be late and it will be like throw my whole day off and like I can't.
Yeah, in principle,
it's
I really
like
dislike
dread.
Snooze
the snooze is like a dread,
right?
For me.
And in some ways, I think Moda Ani is sort of the opposite. There's a book out right now. It's called it's by Mel Robbins, and I haven't followed her or known about her until my mother gave me this book that she had been reading because she had a bracelet, and basically the book and the approach is called Let Them.
Let them.
Actually, it's funny, Ben. I feel like you might find it interesting. It's a Let Them, and then it's in Let Me. I have a lot to say about it, which I won't take our time together to say, but it's an interesting idea or premise. But what I was really going to say within that is that she has this idea that when you find yourself stuck, that you should count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then for her, that's like sort of the magical, sort of like release, and she can do whatever it was that was daunting, overwhelming, or that she was procrastinating. So I, of course, I like to stay up late. I wake up in the morning and I try that. I'm like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I'm like, I'm not like it. Somehow didn't work for me. It just didn't motivate me. But the ritual though of that mindset that or maybe it's exhaustion, but the mindset that has you staying in bed longer is sort of a dread. It could either be exhaustion, which oftentimes it is in my case, or it can be like the dread of a day, which for me it's not, but for many I'm imagining it is, or just an overwhelmed sense.
I read a fascinating thing the other day that said that, staying in bed, for long periods of time is just a form of high functioning depression.
Oh.
And I was intrigued by it. And then I chose not to read the rest of it.
Uh-huh. Well, it is an it's an interesting thing, I think, and in many ways, maybe some of our rituals are a way to sort of fight that.
That's
that
what I
tendency
think.
To say Moda ani lefanecha, like,
Yeah.
I thank you, God, for returning my soul to me and enabling me, to start a new day. And then at night, also, sort of in the alternative, our ritual with the Hashkivenu prayers to say thank you, is I hereby, forgive anyone who hurt me today against my body, my soul, intentionally, unintentionally, and also may I be forgiven for anything that I
Right.
did. Like, they're very, very beautiful rituals.
They are lovely. Also like a nice comment on the practicality of the tradition.
Yeah.
Who understands that not everything is a given.
Yeah.
Right. And it really doesn't. What's that? Like they say that you should never go to bed mad at anyone. Like it's like the tradition's way of sort of saying that you should not go to bed mad at anyone either, and sort of to release that energy.
Right.
And prepare yourself for a new day when you'll say Modani, and you'll wake up and start that new day, and bless God for all of those other blessings that we have.
And I love that sort of the reminder that all of this, like the good, the bad, the easy, the hard, is all a gift from God.
Yeah.
And not to take that for granted.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, Ben, we get into Tazria-Metzora from this week's Parsha, and we're sort of in the thick of the Book of Vayikra of Leviticus, and all of a sudden we've got to like, what I tend to think of is, I don't know if you ever read the book Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein.
I feel like I have read parts. It's a poetry book, right?
Yeah, it's a really beautiful
I think I've read some of it. I don't really like poetry, but I think I've read some of it. I like liturgical poetry.
I was just going to say.
Medieval liturgical poetry.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if I could do this, and I did not practice in anticipation of the day. But there was a Shel Silverstein poem, and it said, I shall not go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. My tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox, and there's one more that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? Et cetera, et cetera. So,
well done.
I still have that.
Impressed.
But one of the reasons that I bring that up is that that's sort of like the gist of Tazria and Metzora is like there's a lot of gash and rash and bumps and skin conditions. And when you read it, it feels, I would say, sort of cringy.
A little bit.
Or at least like.
But there are elements of hope inside. See, for poor Peggy Ann, whatever her face is.
Peggy Ann McKay.
Yeah, she didn't have the benefit of a priestly community or community in general to watch over her in that poem, right? And at least here in Tazria-Metzora, we understand all of these gashes and these rashes, especially when we're talking about tzara'at, which has at times been misinterpreted as leprosy, the skin condition, is a physical manifestation of spiritual problems, right? So, and no one is perfect, and the Torah acknowledges this. And so what do you do when, you have these spiritual problems? We have to take a little time apart, but the community does not leave you, right? And that's, I think, a profound statement.
Ben, will you go in a little bit to, first, it's a tough start.
Tough start.
Because it talks about sort of the purification after a woman gives birth to a child.
Right.
And then we have that sort of like difficult to make sense of distinction between if a woman gives birth to a boy as opposed to if a woman gives birth to a girl, and there's a separation after the birthing, the very, very sacred and holy birthing, and then the menstruation that comes, or the bloodiness that comes with birthing. And then there's sort of this time where a husband and wife are forbidden to be together. I feel like, as someone who's birthed a few babies myself. Like I feel like that's both appreciated and also interesting to make sense of, that the rabbis want to create that boundary or that time lapse between reclaiming intimacy. And then you go into a whole bunch of sort of, I don't know, diseases and scaly afflictions and discolorations and hairs. Will you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll make sense of it together?
Sure. Where do you want to start with the tzara, or do you want to start with the childbirth? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, wherever you feel like it.
So I think it's always good to start at the beginning, right? In the beginning of the parasha, talks about, childbirth in particular. And so there's a huge distinction between the birth of a male child and the birth of a female child. The length of time that the woman is considered to be in a state of ritual impurity, it's double. And so a lot of people look at that and they read it and it's like, oh, it's sexist, which at a face reading, you could argue. But I think it has a lot actually to do with the idea. So we also have to tell ourselves ritual impurity isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? It doesn't say that it's like, oh, you're evil now that you've, right?
No.
Like it's not implying that a girl child is less than, I don't think. I think actually it's quite the opposite.
I was just going to say, I feel like it's like that child that you've just created also has the power, privilege, possibility, really,
right,
of creating new life.
That's exactly right.
Carrying life into the world.
And so I think one of the reasons maybe why a female child it takes double is to give the mother time with that, because both of those are capable of producing new life, which is exceptionally holy. But also we want to keep away all the bad things, right? For extra. So like for a boy, okay, 8th day circumcision, and we're going to throw, you'll be ready for the census in a couple years anyway, but for a girl, and we also have this beautiful tradition that we understand that women in particular sort of have an extra layer of holiness among them. And so I think that extra time is really sort of designed to keep away all that bad energy from this new life that is potential to create even more new life. So I think it's actually something more special to have that. So, if you read it again at its face value, you could say, oh yeah, it's sexist, but we dig a little deeper. But people are afraid to do that in Vayikra because these things can be difficult. And then when you get to the skin conditions, right, the tzara'at in particular, it's a very sort of complicated thing. Again, tzara'at is not an earthly disease. We have a congregant who's convinced that some sort of oh, why don't they just go to the dermatologist, right? It's not something a dermatologist would be able to fix because it's not of this world. And so you have to, that's point why the priests are the ones who have to actually deal with this, right?
And Ben, just to for anyone who's listening, tzara'at is some sort of scaly skin affliction.
Yeah, it's hard to, it doesn't have a modern, I think, connection, but I don't like to translate it because it's not a translatable word. So tzara'at is its name. They used to call it leprosy, but the truth is the conditions don't really match up with the symptoms of leprosy or Hansen's disease, as we're supposed to call it now. So it's not really the same thing. It's just, when the Bible was translated, when anything is translated, there's the potential for mistranslation, but also the bias of the translator.
Yeah.
And so you have this problem. So that's why there's some words in the Torah that I don't like to translate them. So I just call it tzara'at, this scaly skin affliction. And it goes into great detail to describe the lesions and what to do if it's this color or what to do if it's that color. And it will determine how much longer you have to be outside the camp. Because the sort of remedy for this is separation from the community, going to the mikveh, and having the priests make sure that everything is good before you can come back and join everyone. But again,
the priest also does that ceremony.
Yeah, there's a ceremony involving hyssop and a ritual that connects us a little bit back to the ritual of the red cow, or connects us to the ritual of the red cow later, and then also back to Egypt with the sprinkling of the water, Meidinda.
So it's an interesting thing, Ben, when for my first many, many years of working with the B'nai Mitzvah kids, that when they had this portion, they would come in feeling devastated and their parents would be equally mortified. And I was like, this is one of my favorite portions, which I actually really meant. But I should have said that actually, as if I don't mean what I say. I did really mean, even though that was, very surprising to them. But one of the things that's was always interesting to me is that this idea of, I don't want to say excommunicating, but sort of like temporarily.
Yeah, it's a temporary separation.
Sending people out of the community was it was almost perceived by the kids as by the 12 and 13-year-olds. It was almost perceived by them as sort of like inhumane.
Right.
And it wasn't really until, COVID came around that I think there was sort of this layer of understanding that had previously been sort of unthinkable, because all of a sudden we realized that sometimes you have to isolate people or mandate isolation in order to keep, for the greater good.
The greater good, right. And I think
keep a community safe. So I think that became a really interesting thing that forevermore, for at least the stretch of time to come, people really understand, how one needs to make, I think, especially as sort of a community, decisions, based on the needs or based on the bigger.
Yeah, because
bigger
Judaism
shared.
places huge emphasis on community well-being rather than the individual well-being.
Which is so countercultural.
It is a little countercultural, right? Everything's the me, I, now. But, Judaism wants us really to understand the benefits of being with a community. You can pray as an individual. I did today. I said morning prayers. I have a siddur that's only for individual davening. But it would rather we pray with a community, right? With a minyan. So you can have individual things, but here, when the individual is afflicted, right, the community understands that, okay, so here's the thing that needs to happen. We're gonna, set you outside here so you can have your time to recover. And think about also, because remember, this is a punishment for a spiritual condition. What did you do to get this tzara'at in the first place? You need to think about that, right? You need to think about what you did. And so the tradition understands this is usually that our sins committed not in public. So like lashon hara, like gossiping and evil speech, robbery, things that you do sort of in secret, but now you have a physical mark to show that you've committed these secret sins. You need time to think about it. Like you need to think about it.
And it's also interesting because you think of sort of that period of isolation as something that might be important for the community to keep people safe, but also when you are isolated, especially when you are isolated without iPhones or televisions or other things, like you really do, you have the opportunity to do that sort of thinking because you don't have the distractions.
Exactly right. And I think it's like an early form of hitbodedut, in fact, separating yourself out and having that time to talk with God and sort of reckon yourself with what you did.
Yeah, sort of that look inside, look upward.
Some serious cheshbon hanefesh. It's good. It's good.
Yeah, accounting of the soul. So I wanna go to sort of this idea that we get to at the end of the parsha that you spoke about, which is that the Kohen goes out to visit the person who's been in isolation for 7 days. And then the Kohen, who in many ways serves as both a religious leader with some like medical,
you're right,
understandings, will then assess whether that skin disease is complete and whether a person still has the possibility of being contagious. And if both of those, if that time has passed for those concerns, then the priest will bring that person back into the community.
Mm-hmm.
And if it shows that those signs, whether, whatever those signs might be, gash, rash, purple bumps, the Kohen, the religious leader, will leave the person outside at that point, return to the community, and then in 7 more days go back to check in on him or her. And so I'm just wondering, because I think that always inspires me as a human being, as a rabbi. Does it inspire you too? And
for sure. I think it is extremely profound that when somebody is sent outside of the camp, even for a sin, there's still the possibility for tshuva. There's still the possibility for re-entry into the community because it's not excommunication, right? It's temporary. And the fact that the people don't move on without you, they don't leave you there in the desert to wither away. wait for you. And it doesn't matter at the time. If you have to wait another 7 days, they'll wait another 7 days.
I love that. And as you see that, and as Jeremy gives us 2 minutes side, I'm actually thinking how countercultural this is too, that in many ways we live in a world that's practicing a cancel culture.
Right.
Sort of
I don't like
you
that.
did something wrong, therefore
you're done.
It's as if you don't exist.
Right.
Without sort of
no discussion,
set,
right? No alarm.
At some point you can come back.
Right.
And Judaism actually doesn't believe in a cancel culture.
No, we do not.
We believe that everyone is always capable of and has the potential to do tshuva, to work on themselves, to improve themselves, to birth themselves anew, to do differently.
Yes.
And so we do have an open door that people can change, and we believe in that possibility for change, and they can return. I want to just say, for me, I think one of the things that always inspires me about this is that look, we live in a world that doesn't look like the world of our Torah, but where there are so many people that really are lonely, and whether it's being in hospitals or hospice or homebound or none of those things, but just really suffering from loneliness and aloneness. I feel like this always inspires me to say, like, we don't have Kohanes nowadays. And I think that in many ways that means that we all need to take the responsibility.
Well, the Torah agrees with you because the Torah calls us Mamlechet Kohanim, right? It calls us a nation of priests. So we might not have individual priests anymore, but I think the Torah acknowledges that in this time of the destruction of the temple, in this exile that we're in, it's incumbent upon all of us to take on those duties and to perform those functions.
Yeah, to go check on the people.
Yes, check on the people
you haven't seen in a while, to go, to check in with people
especially,
that are alone or lonely or homebound or just outside of the cycle.
And today there's really no excuse because communication has never been easier.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many different modes of communication. There's really no excuse to not. I mean, it used to be, you might write a letter. It might take 3 weeks to get there back in the day. Yeah. But now you can open up your phone. You can FaceTime someone. You can video chat them. You can call them. You can email. There's so many different modes of communication. There's no excuse.
And it's so funny because we really are struggling with an epidemic of loneliness despite all of that. So I guess maybe we'll close with a invitation for people to use the Torah portions of Tazria-Metzora to inspire you to make that call, make that visit, check in on someone, and to know that it's important not only that people feel seen and heard and remembered and valued, but also that we're there to bridge. To bridge the, to be a bridge between people, but also to bring people back into community when they may have fallen away for a whole bunch of different reasons. So wishing everyone a good week ahead, and in this week that we're really celebrating and, really remembering Israel, with Yom HaZikaron, and then going into Yom HaTzmaut. May we all feel a special closeness, I think, this week to Israel, to those who have fallen, to the soldiers who have tried to protect and defend, and the ones that are still doing that, and to all the people that fought for, believed in, and lived their lives advocating for a Jewish homeland. May we be blessed to have an Israel forevermore.
Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.